Well, hello and welcome. Welcome. It's awesome to see such a turnout here. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Steve Bellamy, and I am an assistant professor of English in the Society, Culture, and Discourse department here at Clarke University. Our department has been fortunate enough to offer 2 speaking events this academic year. Some of you may recall that last semester we welcomed Joe McGill to campus to discuss his slave dwelling project. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce Art Cullen, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, the editor and co-owner of the Storm Lake Times, and author of the book Storm Lake, A Chronicle of Change, Resilience, and Hope from a Heartland Newspaper. I suspect many of you already know that. Alongside his wife, Dolores, his son, Tom, and his brother, John, Art has reported on agriculture, the environment, and stories central to both the Storm Lake community and the state of Iowa. In 2007, Art won the Pulitzer Prize for editorial writing, an achievement that recognizes the quality and skill of his reporting, his expertise, and his fearless writing that challenged corporate agricultural interests. I've known Art for about an hour, and I can also add to that a wonderful conversationalist, a sort of lost form. While putting this introduction together, I learned that the Storm Lake Times, with a circulation of 3,000, is the second smallest newspaper to be awarded the Pulitzer. That's quite an accomplishment. According to his website, Art has made it his life's work to ask the big questions, speak truth to power, and share the struggles and successes of his unique community of Storm Lake. His talk tonight, titled Facts, Fiction, and Democracy, is no doubt an extension of this life's work. Thank you again, Art, for speaking at Clarke University this evening. We are so delighted to have you. Please join me in welcoming Art Cullen.
Well, thank you, Steve, and it's great to be back at Clarke. My wife, Dolores, is a 1981 art graduate of Clarke. She sends her warmest regards. And my brother, Bill, ik ben a debuker for several decades, and he's a very gracious host and allowed me to decompress here. We went to Hazel Green this morning and found the site, Fairplay, Wisconsin, where our great-grandfather Joe Murray used to be the postmaster, and it's illustrative that there is no post office there. And before I begin, I wanted to just, everybody give a big round of applause to Mary Lynn Newhouse, who's put up with her husband Jim now for 43 years. It's their anniversary today. Let's give them a big hand. Jim and Mary Ann, you stand up. Where are you? Well, normally I ad lib things here, but since they called it a lecture, I actually wrote stuff down. So let me get onto the old laptop here, and I'll drone on for about 20 minutes, and then I'll wake you up, and at which point you can ask questions, and I'm willing to answer anything. And I think there's a reception afterwards too, and so we can talk there unless you have any criticisms, and then I'm not available. So bear with me while I try and read. If I have problems with the big words, my brother Bill promised to come down and help me. So. Anyway, when my brother John founded the Storm Lake Times in 1990, 2 big stories confronted us from the beginning. First, our lake was filling in from sedimentation. What the glacier dug to 26 feet deep some 14,000 years ago, European settlers to Iowa were able to fill in with mud until it was only about 7 feet deep. Second, the Raccoon River was loaded with nitrate. Storm Lake and Sac City were two of the hottest spots. We didn't connect the two stories at first, but over time it became obvious our intensive tillage, like no place else on earth, was filling in the lake and polluting the river. The Times ramrodded a 20-year campaign to get the state to dredge the lake. State and local authorities responded by removing more than 700,000 cubic yards of Iowa black gold from the bottom of the lake, restoring its depth. It's now the top walleye fishing lake in Iowa and its most important walleye broodery. With dredging in full throes, we headed out around northwest Iowa to document other prairie pothole lakes that were disappearing from sedimentation. We tried to talk with natural resource officials, extension specialists, and farmers, but nobody really wanted to openly discuss how we were killing what were once lakes: Pickerel, Tuttle, Viking, Ingham, and more. We didn't know what to do with the photos since we could not place them in context. So I took them down to the annual water conference of the Iowa Environmental Council in Des Moines in 2013 just to show what we were losing. I was seated next to a big dude with long, wavy white hair and a flannel shirt who looked like a lumberjack. His name was Bill Stowe, the CEO of the Des Moines Water Works. He said he was going to sue us upstream because agriculture was polluting the Raccoon River, the primary source of drinking water for Metro Des Moines. The Water Works operates the world's largest nitrate removal system because of us. Nobody took him seriously because everybody in Iowa knows you just can't sue agriculture. But he did file suit in 2015 under the Clean Water Act against Buena Vista. We say Buena Vista, not Buena Vista. And Nevada and Madrid. Against Buena Vista, Calhoun, and Sac counties as trustees of the drainage districts that were delivering nitrate-rich water from subsurface farm field tiles to the river. The agribusiness complex went apoplectic. Governor Terry Branstad said urban Iowa had declared war on rural Iowa. The Farm Bureau was outraged that anybody would attempt to regulate agriculture. The Buena Vista County Board of Supervisors was ready to put up its dukes. Except, since this was a pollution lawsuit, the insurance company wouldn't defend them. So my reporter son, Tom, went down to the courthouse. He's the guy who catches spears for me, right in the chest. Tom went down to the courthouse to ask them how they intend to pay for their defense of this lawsuit. We have friends, they responded. We asked who their friends were. None of your business. Well, nothing makes my head spin like a public official saying that the public's business is not our business. We then engaged in a 2-year exercise in editorial writing with a certain agenda. First, that agriculture and the environment must be engaged in a mediation for the sake of Iowa. Urban must speak to rural. Lawsuits are not how you accomplish things. Working together with low-cost, common-sense solutions is the answer, but nobody would talk to each other because the stakes were too high. Every acre not planted in corn or soy is a loss to the ag supply chain. Second, the government must be transparent. We must know who is doing the bidding on behalf of the taxpayers of Buena Vista County. So we engaged with the Iowa Freedom of Information Council to help jawbone local officials to disclose their funding sources, coordinated by the Agribusiness Association of Iowa and Governor Branstad's former kingmaker, Doug Gross. The officials refused our entreaties, but we were able to determine through our own reporting that the major funders included, guess who? Monsanto, the Koch brothers, Farm Bureau, and the fertilizer industry. The petrochemical complex was lined up against us, and they were calling the shots. The expectation is that in northwest Iowa, you will yield 200 bushels of corn per acre come hell or high water. Nothing will get in the way, including the Storm Lake Times or Bill Stowe. Ultimately, we forced the counties to withdraw from their defense slush fund, after $1 million had already been spent in court. That was a victory for open government. And a federal district court judge and the Iowa Supreme Court each ruled that essentially you cannot sue agriculture for non-point surface water pollution. The Waterworks lawsuit was dismissed in 2016, and several other lawsuits have been dismissed since then on the same grounds. So we entered a series of 10 editorials from 2016 for a Pulitzer Prize in editorial writing. And I asked my brother John if I could get $50 to enter, and he was very skeptical, as he should be. But I told him that I'd ask St. John Bosco, patron saint of editors and pressmen, if he'd put in a good word for us, since our work was at least honest. I got a good feeling, and John gave me $50. So one Sunday in April, I asked my wife, Dolores, the art major, if she would style me a haircut. I felt that the Pulitzer Prizes would call my name on Monday. She thought I was crazy, but she agreed that I needed a haircut. On Monday, I sat at my desk at the office watching a live stream on the computer of the Pulitzer Prize announcement. There's more than 20 categories. Editorial writing was number 18. They have everything from drama to poetry to... The New York Times is called out for international reporting, the Washington Post for national reporting, the Chicago Tribune for photography, and number 17 was Peggy Noonan of the Wall Street Journal for commentary. She's the one who came up with the line, 1,000 points of light. I knew I was next. And sure as hell, they called my name out, category 18 editorial writing, Art Cullen of the Storm Lake Times. Yeah, baby. So I jumped out of my chair and almost through the stained ceiling tiles, and I yelled at my brother John, who sits 10 feet away from me, our fearless leader, "Holy barnyard epithet, John, we won, we won." He wondered what we won, a spool of fishing line maybe from a charity drawing? No, the freaking Pulitzer, man. And we hugged for the first time in our lives. And I think Bill would attest to that. We're not a huggy group. We learned two big things from the whole episode. First, the citizens of Buena Vista County do not really control Iowa government, state or local. Our franchise has been purchased by Wichita and Delaware. We are a corporate subsidiary of Big Ag. Even if the county supervisors had wanted a discussion with the Waterworks about a better way, the agrochemical complex would not allow it. Second, the sedimentation of Storm Lake and the pollution of the Raccoon River each began to accelerate after 1980 in a confluence of climate change that brings more extreme weather and the intensive tillage that petrochemically driven agriculture brought to the Iowa landscape over the past half century. We pointed all that out, and it almost did us in. We were called an enemy of the people. A county supervisor said we shamed the Pulitzer Prizes, claiming we didn't deal in the truth. State legislators wouldn't speak to us. We lost advertisers and subscribers. In fact, we lost about $70,000 the year we won the Pulitzer Prize. That's another thing we learned. There's an organized campaign going on to promote disinformation and to snuff out independent journalism. Facts are the stuff of democracy, but they get in the way of a good story on your way to Mar-a-Lago. Just this session, Iowa legislators put up a bill that would eliminate paid public notices in newspapers. The purpose is twofold: to kill a third of Iowa's newspapers and to keep you in the dark about how the school board is spending your money or trying to bash gays. During the pandemic, a half-dozen county seat newspapers closed, including the venerable Centerville Iowegian, one of the state's oldest businesses. Nationwide, there are about 300 news deserts, cities of 20 and 30,000 population with no local news source. Nobody is there to report on the lake drying up, the river being polluted, or your kid scoring a game-winning touchdown. This caught the attention of Jerry Rishus of New York, who'd toured the world for 15 years as director of photography for Anthony Bourdain on CNN, sampling food and drink. After Bourdain's suicide, Jerry spotted a story in the New York Times noting that a paper in the middle of nowhere won a Pulitzer. He knew exactly where Storm Lake was because Jerry was reared on a hog farm near Buffalo Center, up near Mason City in north central Iowa. And he called to say that he's going to be visiting his folks and wondered if he could swing by to shoot a film about us. Sure, why not? Jerry and producer Beth Levison filmed us over a 3-year period. They took 300 hours of video and boiled her down to 82 minutes. They documented Dolores shooting the 4th of July Parade of Nations, where immigrants celebrate their heritage from dozens of nations. More than 30 languages are spoken in Storm Lake, a meatpacking town. They followed son Tom as a candidate for Alta City Council tried to save mobile home residents from eviction. And you know who stood up for him? The Teamsters. When the pandemic hit, they recorded me talking about how Brother John and I thought about just walking away from it all. Sell the building, pay off your debts, live on Social Security, let somebody else run after the news. Of course, we couldn't quit. Neither of us golf or fish. But we didn't know what to do. Advertising had disappeared, and we were going down pretty fast. Then a call from heaven came again, and this is crazy. A wealthy entrepreneur from California by the name of John Tu, T-U. He's the president of Kingston, founder of Kingston Technologies, and the memory in your cell phone probably came from John Tu. He heard an interview I gave on, about the documentary on NPR's Fresh Air, and he emailed to say he wanted to help us. He worried that there would be nobody to be the mortar of building democracy in little old Storm Lake. He didn't know what we need. He didn't know that we needed about $60,000 to make our nut that year, the end of 2021, to keep us going. And he sent a check for $65,000. We needed 66, and not knowing how much we needed, he sent a check for $65,000. Excuse me, I have COVID. Just joking, just joking. I'm actually a cocaine addict. So anyway, he sends a check for $65,000. Thank you, John Tu and John Bosco. His help allowed us to buy our competitor, the Storm Lake Pilot Tribune, and we were both failing at the time. We were both going broke. And so we consolidated these two failing newspapers into one sustainable operation over the past year. And we finished 2022 with a $2,900 profit. And that's a huge victory in today's newspaper environment. We started the Western Iowa Journalism Foundation so that tax-deductible gifts may be made to support independent reporting in 5 counties of rural Iowa, Western Iowa. We've raised over $1 million in just over a year, but that doesn't replace the revenue lost to social media, mainly in advertising. The grocers Hy-Vee and Fairway pulled out of Iowa newspapers in 2021 statewide. The car dealers and furniture ads are gone forever. We still have some help wanted, but that's eroding as Indeed.com offers job ads for free. It's tough to compete with free. Still, we're hanging on and making a transition that delivers facts where people look for them, on their cell phones. Thankfully, circulation is growing. Our revenue from digital subscriptions has almost caught up to our print revenue. That's a good sign. If we can't make that transition, You'll be left with Facebook, Twitter, Fox News, and MSNBC to get a steady diet of propaganda. That climate change is a hoax, despite what our own eyes tell us, as Australia and California were on fire. That Iowa school children are being, quote, groomed by pedophiles in the classroom to become cross-dressers. That Mexicans are invaders and not the people who cut your meat, lay your sod, and care for your grandma in the nursing home. We don't traffic in BS because we can't get away with it. We got to live here too. We have to face the school board president and the mayor, and we need a straight explanation for readers why their property assessments are ballooning across Iowa. Facts are the foundation of democracy. Journalism, as it has been practiced in Iowa, seeks the truth, not vanquishing an opponent. The local news providers who are locally owned are doing okay. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune, the Boston Globe, the Cedar Rapids Gazette, the Dubuque Telegraph-Herald, and the Storm Lake Times-Pilot. But we need your help, your subscriptions, your donations, and your letters to the editor telling us why we're wrong. A civic life built around free speech and a robust public debate demands that all of us be involved in keeping the record straight. We know the sky is blue, but a lot of people want us to think that it's green or that the moon is made of cream cheese. Local editors used to be the gatekeepers of facts and promoted a civil debate founded on fairness and accuracy. We're losing that, and in the process, we're losing our democracy. Just look at Tennessee, where legislators were expelled for speaking out against gun violence from the well of the House when the Speaker refused to recognize them. Or in Florida, where Governor Ron DeSantis is trying to banish protections for free speech. Or in Iowa, where the governor doesn't hold press conferences where her narrative might be disrupted. Yet we remain reporting on climate impacts on agriculture and food production. I just drove out west to witness firsthand how drought is wiping out cattle producers on the Great Plains as the huge Ogallala aquifer that runs from Nebraska to Texas is being drunk dry. It's getting so hot, it could become difficult to grow that 200 bushel corn south of Interstate 80 right here in Iowa. It's already happening in western Kansas, where yields were 20 to 30 bushels per acre last year, and that's on the good farms. And we continue to report that people wonder why their egg prices are getting higher, you know? Couldn't be climate change. And we continue to report that the Raccoon River is among America's most endangered from pollution. So is the Mississippi River, according to American Rivers, as Iowa and Illinois overload it with commercial fertilizer and manure. The Gulf of Mexico is suffocating from it, and we're destroying the shrimping industry so we can grow 200 bushel corn. It's no hoax. It's our reality in the here and now. People recognize the truth when it struggles through. Readers flock to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Star Tribune, and the Times-Pilot as President Trump waged an all-out assault on facts and kept trying to shoot the messenger. He still is. People turned to the Times-Pilot for facts on COVID as Storm Lake became the second hottest spot in the nation during the peak of the pandemic at Tyson Foods. We're waking up to the fact that freedom isn't free and that we must all be vigilant in our defense of democracy. Plus, we have St. John Bosco riding shotgun. Just when you think that democracy is on the rocks, an angel in the form of a Chinese immigrant reaffirms your faith in the American experiment. We'll never give up on democracy. Neither should you. Support your local newspaper. And thanks for coming tonight, and I'm happy to take any of your questions. Fire them at me. Thank you. Shout them out.
I've been reading your
Actually, I don't know if you all remember Julie Gamet. Used to be on WHL radio and wrote for the Register. And she was looking for a way to help these struggling local newspapers, primarily the Carroll Times-Herald and us. And so she started this thing on Substack to bring together Iowa writers so we could get a larger audience together. And that's how that started. It's going pretty well. We've gotten about over 100 new subscribers for the Storm Lake Times through Substack. So it's really worked out well for us. And if you haven't heard of it, check it out sometime. There's the environmental writer Bill McKibben's on there. There's a lot of great writers working on Substack. And what they're doing is they're going around the Washington Post and the New York Times so they can have their own franchise. Like myself, the New York Times, they paid me $150 for a column once. I wrote about Steve King and what a jerk he was. And on Substack, I could have gained $1,000 in subscribers, So it's a good model, and I'd encourage you to look at it. Yes, sir?
Yes, could you say something about how immigrants have contributed to the health and well-being of the Storm Lake area?
Yeah. When Bill and I were growing up, we had a Jewish eye doctor and one black basketball player at Buena Vista College. And that was what our idea of diversity. Well, or when a Catholic would date a Lutheran. A Missouri Synod Lutheran, that is. And in about 1980, High Grade closed. That was a union plant, the old Amalgamated Meat Cutters. And the Amalgamated Meat Cutters were done in. They became the UFCW. And they had their teeth pulled. And they busted the union and reopened as a plant. And the strikebreakers were all Lao immigrants from, Governor Bob Ray's Thai-Dam refugee program. So Storm Lake was a major beachhead for Thai-Dam refugees. And we have a Buddhist temple in Storm Lake. I think it's one of 4 in Iowa. And it's gorgeous. It's this huge gold-plated thing right next to a ready-mix plant in the industrial park. And it's just like this gorgeous oasis in the middle of concrete, It's crazy. And at first, people were calling them gooks and saying, were they the people we were fighting over in Vietnam? And no, actually, these are the guys who were working for the CIA and fighting for us in Cambodia. And then people started getting used to it, and they'd, triple up to a house, 3 families in a house, and then they'd pay cash for the next house, just like, the old Scandahoovians used to do. And Iowans, after a while, they can respect that. And so they got used to the Asians. And then there weren't enough Asians. Then during the farm crisis, all the farm boys who used to work night shifts in the packing house headed for Oklahoma in the oil fields. And everybody bailed out of Iowa. And anybody in Dubuque who was around then can remember it painfully well. And so they started bringing Mexicans in to supplement the Asian workforce. And then, they were all young, single Mexican guys, and they're cutting hog throats all day. And so they'd go out and get drunk at night and get in a bar fight, of course. I would. And then eventually, they'd get married and settle down and then, buy a house with cash and work their butts off. And they bought a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe to St. Mary's Parish and revitalized the parish, and all of a sudden Mexicans were okay. And now we have, like I say, 30 languages spoken. People from Myanmar, Cuba, Sudan, and all over the world are in Storm Lake. And it's made it a much more interesting community than when Bill and I grew up. We thought it was a big deal when a McDonald's opened in Storm Lake. And now, you know, we have better Mexican food than you can get in Jalisco. And those kids are now matriculating through school, you know. So they want to stay home. They don't want to go to the Twin Cities or Chicago. They want to stay with their parents, you know. And so they're founding businesses now. They don't want to work in the packing house either. So they're starting their own businesses, and they're making it, I think, one of the most interesting little towns in America, frankly. You know, so it's had a tremendous positive impact on Storm Lake. And of course, meatpacking is not an easier or beneficent business. And Tyson is not a social welfare agency by any means. And, but on the other hand, they're paying them $21.50 an hour starting, which is better than we pay. And it gives people who were living in a cardboard box a foot on the rung of the American ladder to success, in my opinion. And, you know, if we can't let immigrants in, then you aren't going to get pork chops. That's all there is to it. Because your kids don't want to work there.
I got the impression from your book that Buena Vista University was doing a really good job of reaching out to that element.
Absolutely. Yeah. So is Iowa Central Community College out of Fort Dodge. We have a big satellite campus in Storm Lake. And so you can now, Storm Lake has one of 2 charter schools in the state. And don't flinch when I say charter school. This is one that's operated by the Storm Lake School District and Iowa Central and Buena Vista. And so you can go to Storm Lake High School for 5 years and graduate with a degree, with your high school diploma and an AA degree or a VOTEC certificate. And it's all free. And then you can go to you can take classes at Buena Vista College for free, and now Buena Vista is offering they offer 12 first-generation full ride scholarships every year, and there's also one that thanks really to Sally Mason, the former president of the University of Iowa, who herself was a first-generation college student. Started the Storm Lake Scholars Program at Iowa, and they also offer a dozen full-ride scholarships every year to first-generation college students from Storm Lake. And these kids are coming back to Storm Lake once they graduate. And so the future's bright, and Buena Vista, the University of Iowa, Iowa Central, and the Storm Lake School District are really doing a bang-up job of it, really. And I admire them for it. Yeah.
After all your energy working toward the water quality issues in Iowa, and now where are you, and what do you think is happening?
Well, of course, nothing's happened. We're still, the Raccoon River is still running hot with nitrate, as is the Des Moines River, the Floyd River in northwest Iowa, the Little Sioux, you name it. And, these guys want to wear suspenders with their belt, so they put on anhydrous ammonia to provide nitrogen to the corn. It's essential to growing corn. And then they'll put hog shit on top of it, double what Iowa State University would recommend, because they've been led to believe by both the hog industry and the chemical industry that you need this hog shit and you need the anhydrous. Well, you don't need both. And what has changed is the conversation in Iowa. It used to be that nobody had ever heard of cover crops in Iowa. Well, in the last 5 years, we're talking about cover crops. Since that lawsuit, it really did change how we discuss, how we approach the landscape. And so at least the Practical Farmers of Iowa, which is a sustainable ag group, they were persona non grata in Ames. at Iowa State for many years. And now they're conducting seminars at Iowa State that'll draw 1,000 people to their annual conferences. And they used to get 10 or 15, people wearing Birkenstocks. And now they're getting real farmers with square-toed boots on, and learning about cover crops, how to improve soil health, how to improve yields, and cut chemical use. If you use cover crops, right, you can cut your Roundup by 75%. And not to mention you're increasing your soil productivity, and we can, just by planting 10% of a field to grass, you can stop 90% of the nutrient outflow to the surface water. So you can cut your pollution by 90% just by planting 10% of your field in grass. And we did that until 1980, until Ronald Reagan and the Freedom to Farm thing came along. And, Earl Butz said, let's plant fence row to fence row, and John Block followed him up. It went from Nixon to Reagan and that's why we're in the fix we're in. And the problem is, we'll never be able to regulate agriculture in Iowa. It's just taboo. And so then we have to provide incentives to farmers to make cover crops profitable. And they're cheap, and they require some management and some labor, but we can make conservation work profitable for farmers, and we should. They've got a lot of, when they're paying $20,000 an acre, they got to make that land produce. And the banker is not sentimental about monarch butterflies. So we've got to, we know how to do it. That's the damn thing, planting prairie strips between corn rows, or setting aside 10%, planting buffer strips along rivers and lakes. We know how to do it, we're just not. And because it's considered an expense rather than an investment that pays dividends. And so we have to pay dividends. And I love Tom Vilsack, God bless him, but he's in bed with the agrochemical cabal, trying to bring them along in this game. And it's dreadfully slow. And as we know, California is on fire. We've got to change rapidly. And we're taking it at the Iowa pace, which is, about as fast as the Wisconsin glacier was. And so we need to put a burr under the saddle of the Biden administration. They keep talking about the IRA bill and the infrastructure bill and all this great climate stuff and everything. Where is it, man? Where is it? Where are the solar units in Iowa? Where's the battery plant? Where's the cover crops? Where is paying farmers for conservation? It's not happening because we're bound up in this national inertia, and Iowa really is the source of inertia, we're kind of the center of that. But we can change it, and if we can just convince these politicians that it's in their interest ultimately to bring these people along at a much faster rate. And we have to do it through incentives. And we can't complain about farmers being on welfare. Let's just shut up about that. Just take our medicine. Yeah, Mr. Cub. Oh, God, well, I forgot about the Bears, excuse me. Go Vikes, eh? How about you?
There's a lot of gluten insensitivity or sensitivity now, and last time you were over talking to Galena, we mentioned Monsanto, then Bayer, and of course Roundup, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, because I've heard that 90-95% of our wheat in the nation, and even corn,
They're Roundup, yeah, to crimp it, you bet. Yep. Well, no, actually on wheat they use Roundup to make it easier to harvest it.
Right. And I was just wondering, is maybe all that gluten sensitivity?
That's what Michael Pollan, the author of The Omnivore's Dilemma, would suggest, yes. And that he's saying that there also are interactions that happen in the cow's gut because of all these chemicals. Also, feeding soy so heavily to poultry is changing the way, well, you'd have to read his book, but he's not crazy. And I don't think we know. We're just realizing now that nitrate, there's a link between nitrate and Parkinson's disease, and we just figured that out recently. We thought it was just blue baby syndrome. Okay, so you got a few blue babies. We got to grow corn. Well, it's also causing cancer and Parkinson's and all sorts of other things. And we've been doing this since the 1970, essentially. 1970, 75, when we really got into hardcore into this kind of new paradigm of agriculture. Industrial agriculture is what I call it. And, and it hasn't done anything good for rural Iowa. 67 of Iowa's 99 counties lose population every year, including New Hartford, Chuck Grassley's beloved hometown. And, all it's been is consolidation built around chemicals. And consolidation has been, has just sucked the very life and character out of Iowa. Because really, the Iowa character was preserved in these 99 county seats from Centerville to Storm Lake. And we're destroying them. And we wonder what happened to Iowa nice. Well, that's what happened. It was consolidated. Yes, sir.
Making this point from the perspective of the National Farmers Union.
Yeah.
And having attended seminars at Iowa State, we still don't know, and from the viewpoint of dredging Storm Lake also, we still don't know, and if we do, we can't convince people what the value is of a cubic yard of topsoil.
Yeah. What value is there to a cubic yard of topsoil? Well, I don't know. But what I do know is this, that we in Buena Vista, the flatlands of western Iowa, in Buena Vista County, we're losing soil on an average of 2 tons per acre per year. And that is 4 times faster than nature can rebuild it. And around here, they're losing it, up to 20 tons per acre per year. And you can see it on the hills just right now. Drive along the Mississippi and look at that brown, crappy soil with corn stubble on it. Why the hell are they growing corn there? And they couldn't give it away, right? It was $2 corn, remember, then $3 corn. And they couldn't give it away, and they're still planting it. Well, now it's, it's doubled in price since, the ethanol boom. But when ethanol goes away, it's going to go right back down to $3, and they'll still be planting it. And so I don't know what the value of a cubic, but land in Sioux County in extreme northwest Iowa, and I say that in more ways than one, extreme, is going for $30,000 an acre. So, or more even, and so that tells you what that soil is worth, and we're losing it at an alarming rate. And so we've got about 14 inches of topsoil left in what we call the Des Moines lobe of the Wisconsin Glacier, the most productive corn ground in the world, basically from Clear Lake to Storm Lake. And we got about 14 inches left, and we are, when that's gone, and it will be gone at this rate, when you're losing an inch every year, and I'm not exaggerating, but We cover it all up with it because we're growing all our food in a petrochemical base. And so it's almost like it's a hydroponic operation. And the soil is just there to hold the chemicals.
So how do you feel about GMOs then?
Well, Buena Vista County has been in a drought, a severe drought for the last 3 years, and we're still yielding 200 bushels an acre because of genetically modified drought-resistant corn. So I think there's a place for genetically modified corn, and I think it can be useful, and I don't think that's our biggest issue. I think our biggest issue is how we're farming, and that 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, 15%. And it's not just cows farting and belching either. It's, nitrogen goes up into the air, and that's a very volatile greenhouse gas. Methane, of course, from livestock. And so what are we doing? We're creating programs to increase livestock production using methane digesters. So it just allows these mega dairies to get even bigger and bigger and bigger. And more consolidation, and I'm not convinced it'll reduce methane emissions, but I think there are bigger issues than genetically modified crops, and that it's the way we abuse the land, I think. And I'm not a freak, by that statement, I don't think I'm a freak environmentalist. I believe in the use of glyphosate, a limited use of glyphosate, for example, to crimp winter rye, which is a cover crop, and they use it to crimp it so they can plant soybeans into that rye. And I believe that there are uses for genetically modified crops, and I'm skeptical of growth hormones for dairy cattle and beef cattle, but I think you got to take a balanced approach and then look at what are our worst problems. And our worst problem is our tillage. And when you till the soil, you release carbon into the atmosphere. We've been sequestering this carbon in the soil, and every spring, then we release it all back in, and we've got to stop it. And nowhere is it more evident than around here. I mean, when we were kids between Storm Lake and Carroll, and then around here in Dubuque, all you saw were green hills and black cattle dotting the landscape. How many cattle you can drive the entire state of, as I did. I drove from Storm Lake to Dubuque and not see a single cow along Highway 20. And when we were kids, we'd drive from Storm Lake to Carroll, and you see cattle the whole way, and Dad would say, "It smells like money." And now it doesn't smell like money, it smells like corporate hog shed is what it smells like.
So, Mr. Cullen, thanks for being here,
Well, thanks for coming.
for all you do, but this is very timely. The presently constituted Iowa legislature this week adopted a bill to prohibit drones from flying over
Yeah,
livestock.
another ag-gag bill.
I'd just be interested in your perspective.
Well, it'll be declared unconstitutional, as every ag-gag bill has been. And, well, then again, maybe it won't with the Supreme Court we have. But every ag-gag bill has been found unconstitutional. But it's just another thing to distract us from what the real issues are. The reason they're bashing gays and trying to say that, slavery, we weren't that bad, is to distract us from the real issues that, that people in Ottumwa have been left behind with no future and no prosperity. And that I saw these cattlemen who are losing, liquidating their entire herds and just, they don't know what they're going to do out in western Kansas. That's the real issue. And the fact that, there was a tornado in Los Angeles 2 weeks ago. And 14 atmospheric river bombs hit the Pacific coast and is destroying property from Oregon down to Mexico. That's the real issue, and nobody wants to deal with it. We'd rather defame Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is Iowa's hero, graduate of Waterloo West, or we'd rather worry about when did transsexuals become an issue in Iowa, of all places? Has anybody ever seen a drag queen in the women's restroom in Iowa? Anybody? No, of course not. It's all a huge distraction. And who owns the media you're listening to on the radio? Sinclair Broadcasting? What are you watching on TV? Fox News? And then you believe all this crap. What are you reading on the internet? Oh, I get my news from Facebook, And that's written by some guy in his underwear in Macedonia in a basement. And so we get this distorted image because we think, well, why would I want to pay for the Storm Lake Times Pilot or the New York Times when I can read the news from Macedonia for free? So that's where we're at as a country, and I call it willful civic ignorance. And it's been going on since I got into the newspaper business. Newspaper circulation has been declining since 1979, since I got into the business. And people have been abandoning factual information for the last 50 years. And the internet just took it to warp speed. And so the drones and all that crap, whatever they're up to in the legislature, I quit paying attention because it's all just a distraction from what the real issues are, and that is that the planet's on fire. Yes, ma'am.
Julie Gamek and Riga Basu have this new podcast called
Yeah.
What the Hell Happened to Iowa?
Right.
And I know you were on it.
Yeah.
But how do you explain the fact that this state was a swing state, went twice for Barack Obama, and now look what's happening?
What did Barack Obama do for us? He was classy, he was elegant, he broke the glass ceiling. It was inspiring to see him get elected. And then what did he do? What did he do for immigrants? Let's start there. Not a goddamn thing. He said, oh, I'll sign this administrative order making you dreamers and I'll put you in limbo. And when he had the majority in the Congress, he decided to go for a watered-down health insurance bill that was written by Chuck Grassley and Max Baucus in a back room. And it isn't worth a damn. And people said, with that, I might as well flip the bird to the world and vote for Trump and Steve King and Joni Ernst. And, and let's just call Art Cullen the enemy of the people because he's a registered Democrat. And so I know I sound cynical, but I am. And I've been made that way, frankly. Yes, ma'am.
I'm a poll worker.
Yeah. 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 Thank you, by the way.
But it's one of those things that I don't think people realize, and young people especially, but I don't know where we're headed with all of this. So I just keep my head down and keep working.
That's all you can do.
But as a state, it's really getting frustrating to do this and to see where we're headed. So how do we spring hope in the younger people to take an interest in our democracy?
Well, first of all, I think about John too. And he really reaffirmed my faith in democracy. I thought we were on the skids. And I realized that, you know, he'd seen the worst. And he fled mainland China with Chiang Kai-shek and then landed in Taiwan and found out they were about as authoritarian. And so he was going to do anything he could to get to the U.S. And he's committed to seeing that we remain a democratic country and a free country. And so that's one thing. The other thing I think about is that, you know, my dad ran on the Kennedy ticket in 1960 for the state legislature, and he had a cross burned in his honor in Sioux Rapids. And, you know, so we've come a long way, baby, and in that respect. And, you know, gay people who love each other can still get married in Iowa. And so, and you're still working at the polls, and we're still here. And, you know, I have my own certain views about politics, obviously, but I can still talk with my Republican friends about, you know, property tax assessments. We can still find common ground. And if you don't talk to a farmer about, if you don't use the words climate change and regulation, you can talk to a farmer about conservation and stewardship and clean water. And so I think there's hope. But God, we're lazy about it. And you know, when people don't even want to read a newspaper because it, you know, might cost them more than a cup of coffee. You know, we charge $1 for our newspaper, and that's too much to ask for democracy. And look at me, look at the way I dress. It's not like I'm making a lot of money. You know, it's the only, I can only afford white socks. So, you know, we got to take stock in ourselves, you know, I think. And every once in a while it takes you getting knocked on your butt to realize that you got to get up and fight.
We'll take one last question and then we'll join Art in the atrium for more conversation.
Iowa Wesleyan is closing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what would the community look like?
They asked for $12 million. Iowa Wesleyan asked for $12 million. And Kim Reynolds said no. Well, what did she give $12 million to? What the hell? Field of Dreams. Some huge corporation that Frank Thomas owns. And I love Frank Thomas, but, you know, come on. He's got $12 million of his own. But Iowa Wesleyan couldn't afford to help them.
So if Buena Vista had some of the same problems that Iowa Wesleyan has, would that really impact on the community, or is the community that fragile?
No, it would change Storm Lake in fundamental ways. Fortunately, Presbyterians run it, not Methodists, and they're a lot tighter with a penny at Buena Vista. So they value their Scots heritage. Yeah, it would change the fundamental nature of Storm Lake. Storm Lake just simply wouldn't be the same. Now, he got his second question. Is there one final question?
You know, I come from a family of farmers in your area. And
Whereabouts?
well, Greene County, near Carroll.
Oh, you bet. Jefferson. Yeah. Sheridan, Peyton Sheridan, yeah. That's the Iowa conversation. We're having this conversation from every... Oh, where are you from, Betty? What's your mom do? I think I knew your cousin.
But what you said, and I'm experiencing in my family, when I grew up, I was surrounded by all these small farms.
Yes.
And farmers were concerned about, yes, the yield, but also they wanted to make sure the ground was going to be ready for the crop next year.
Right.
Take care of it. But when you're paying $20 in our area, $30,000 an acre, the young farmer
No.
going to be able to, so you do get corporate farmers or what my family calls the city farmers. They
Yeah.
come in and buy these things.
Farming from a desk, they say.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, what is the solution that we get young farmers that I think farming has to be in their blood to really want to do that kind of work. But how do we encourage, how do we support that kind of farming rather?
Well, you know, that's the question we've been asking now since the farm crisis or before, and I don't have an answer for it, other than, you know, it gets down to basic economics 101. You substitute capital for labor, capital in the form of technology for labor, and then that drives labor off the land and into the city, and that's been going on since heck was a pup. And I don't know how you fix that. And if I did, I'd be the governor. Yeah.
You might have some people in this room vote for you if you run for governor.
Thank you, everybody.